Now waiting patiently is the one and only Chael Sonnen, making his Bellator debut Saturday in Inglewood, California against Tito Ortiz. Chael, how are you?
What's happening here? That was interesting stuff.
Wow.
I love MMA drama. I didn't know any of that was going on. That's interesting.
It's always interesting when it gets dropped on you in the last 2 minutes of the interview and you're like, oh, damn, I got to go a little longer now. So I appreciate you standing by. And you know what? It only occurred to me now that your last opponent was Rashad Evans, and here you are back to back. How about that? I didn't even do that on purpose. That was your last fight, UFC 167, November of 2013. This is your first training camp since, essentially. What's it been like? Have you enjoyed being an active fighter again?
It's been really hard, man. I can tell you. I think they were probably always hard. That's what my wife keeps telling me. She says, this is how you feel every time. But I guess I forgot. I don't remember being this sore and this tired all the time. But yeah, I've enjoyed the process. It's good to be back. You know, it's always good to have something to do, have a finish line, you know, a goal, and where then you can go, you know, test if everything's working or not. And so, yeah, I liked it.
Do you feel this way because either A, it's been, 3 years or so, B, you're working really hard because this means a lot to you, you've changed things, why do you think it's your age, why do you think you feel this way and maybe think that it's a little tougher than in the past?
Yeah, so I think it's because I don't remember. I mean, again, that's what my wife tells me. She tells me that this is the way that it always is, and that I'm always feeling stiff and sore and tired. But yeah, I don't know. I think all of those things are fair points. Being out a little bit doesn't make things easier. The body doesn't get better with time, and so I think that age could be true, but. It's nothing substantial. It's not substantially different. It's just something I've noticed. I don't remember being this sore and tired.
I know you're very locked in, and you appear to be in great shape. I mean, just seeing from your face. But did you see what happened to BJ Penn yesterday? And as someone who is coming back from a long layoff, do you fear that sort of thing? Do you fear people talking about you afterwards saying, I don't want to see him fight anymore. He's too old. He's a shell of his former self. Do you think about that?
No, I never think about that, but that is a real thing. It's eventually your race is ran, and you're never really done with this sport, but at some point this sport is done with you. And as far as BJ went, I thought he had a big matchup problem there. That's a really unique guy, a really tough guy. And BJ does go fight some hammers. His previous fight was Frankie Edgar. He walks right into this guy with a big layoff. I think that matchup-wise, he had some problems. I think the biggest negative I would say about BJ was the same as I would say about what Ronda did. It wasn't a matter of the jab and the cross and the takedown and the submissions didn't work. It was a matter of they never tried them. If you go and you fight somebody and they're a better fighter, you're going to get beat. But you got to bring your tools with you. If you don't have any skills to bring, if you don't have any offense to offer, it failing, fine, but it not offering an offense, I think that's something that needs review.
Great perspective there. I saw this clip that Bellator put out of you talking about Tito Ortiz, this fight. I thought it was really well produced, and in 5 minutes told the story wonderfully. And at the end, we saw you get very emotional. I feel like I've been following you for a long time. I never knew this story about you and your father and what fighting Tito Ortiz meant. And if anyone hasn't seen it, I do suggest you check it out. It's on their Twitter. I've tweeted it as well. You were very emotional talking about speaking to your dad and promising him that you'd be A, a champion at some point, and B, you'd beat Tito. Was that a hard thing to recount for you? Because I've never seen you like that before.
Yeah, it was really tough. It was really tough, and I didn't know it would be. It's one of those things, once they start filming, it's kind of hard to stop anything. But yeah, it was a true story, and it was, it came from a good place too. Tito took it as an insult, but he actually heard it wrong. My dad and I were big Tito fans, and at that time, there was only two divisions. You had the light heavyweight division, you had the heavyweight division. There was no other classes. And even the light heavyweight division was relatively new. It used to just be open weight. You remember Hoist Gracie? It didn't matter what a guy weighed. I don't think there even was a weigh-in. So, yeah, Tito was the guy, and I was planning to get to him sooner than later. It just took all these years. It took me a long time to get my break, and I didn't get my break until 2005. So, that's just kind of the life. I'm sitting here complaining about it, but every fighter listening to this knows what I mean. It's hard to get into this industry.
And so will you be thinking, more so than usual about your father this week when you square off with him at the weigh-in, when you see him? Like, are you carrying a little extra baggage going into this fight?
Oh, I suppose that's fair. I mean, I have my process. I follow my process to try to go out and just put on the best performance. I try not to think about the outcome of a fight. I don't think like I got to win this or what if I lose. I just try to think about performing. There's a few things that I need to do to have a chance at success in this match, and so I'm focusing on those. And that's really it.
Are you catching Tito Ortiz at the best time possible? Like, do you feel like he's on borrowed time? He's already said this is his last fight. Is he a shell of his former self, in your opinion?
Excuse me. It's hard to say. I've never thought about it in those terms, but it is really hard to say. Those guys that were champions in the early 90s, the way the sport is progressing. You and I were just talking about BJ Penn, one of the best to have ever done it. I've trained with BJ Penn. He came out to Oregon. Not only did I get my hands on him, but I watched him going with Evan Tanner and Randy Couture. I mean, go through the list. And I can tell you, he was as good as the hype. He was said to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and he was. And but it does go quickly. So, is Tito a lesser guy? I would listen to that argument. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but I would listen. The other side of that is those guys sucked back then. It just was a different deal, man. I mean, people weren't watching, people weren't participating. It was just a different deal in terms of not only the techniques, the training, the coaching, but the level of athlete as well. And you do have some guys from back then that got a really good run. And Tito was the best. There was no one that could beat him. It's just also a true statement to say the guys were not very good back then.
The first time I ever had you on this show was prior to UFC 104 when you were about to fight Yushin Okami. And I remember that interview for me was a revelation because you talked about promotion, something that fighters don't often talk about openly. You were talking about how it was hard to carry the fight. You were on the unaired prelims. You weren't even on the spike prelims. You were in a dark match against the #2 middleweight in the world. And you were talking about how the guy's not speaking. How can I promote this fight if the other guy's not speaking? Flip side, here we are, your return fight. Tito is speaking, but it seems like every time he speaks, it's a fumble. It's not exactly coming out the way he wants it to. Is that equally frustrating for you? How do you feel about the way he's built up this fight? I think you've done a great job. That's expected. But what about the other side of the coin?
I've appreciated his effort. I really have. There has been a lot of fumbles there, but the effort's there, the passion's there. He means it. It's serious. When it's a guy's last fight, there is something extra that he's taken with him, particularly when you're fighting essentially your hometown in front of all of your people. So I've appreciated his effort, but yeah, man, there's been some blunders. He isn't the most eloquent speaker that I've come across.
Do you feel like he's too emotional going into this fight? I know we talked about you and your father, but it seems like he's, aggressive. Like you kind of have a smile on your face. You're kind of telling it like it is, but it seems like he's very upset about, unless it's an act. How do you perceive it?
Yeah, I thought that he might be a little bit. I mean, again, everybody's approach is different, and you can't sit back and judge one guy's approach because all you're doing is projecting your own. I can tell you, for me, I've done this a lot of times. I've done this a lot more times than Tito, regardless of whether he got his break first or not. I think he's had 20-some fights. I fought 49 men. So I am resigned to the fact that our skills are our skills. And, when we fight, my skills are my skills and his skills are his skills. And how you feel or your emotion, I hear people talk about that all the time. And they're usually saying you need to be positive, you need to be confident, you need to have belief. I hear all of this talk from coaches, but there's never been a round that concluded in the history of fighting where the judges said, which guy looks more confident? And then marks the ballot. I mean, your skills are your skills. This is what wins fistfights. It's not anything else than that. So I understand that concept, and if I can get people to tune in and watch, then great. But either way, on January 21st, I'm going to whip Tito's ass.
Do you have the same group of coaches around you going into this fight, or have you changed anything?
Same coaches, same teammates, same gym. Essentially, the gym I used to be at closed, but then all the members went over and we're still together as a team. So Yeah, everything's pretty much the same. I can just tell you, I don't remember training being so hard. I remember it being a little bit easier, but my wife tells me I'm wrong. I really don't know, Errol. It's been a few years.
It was super interesting. Bellator announces this fight, as you mentioned, in Tito's backyard, Inglewood, California. He's a draw in that part of the country. Main event, massive deal. You're a new signing, all this stuff. And then shortly thereafter, the UFC announces that they're going to be in Anaheim for a pay-per-view. And then shortly thereafter that, they can't secure a main event and they cancel the card. A, what did you think when the UFC announced that they were going the same night, same market as you? And B, was it a feather in your cap, a small victory when they canceled the card?
Yeah, I loved it, man. I love competition. Counter programming is part of it. But to your point, they've counter programmed before. That makes good business sense. They've never essentially played the same city and also competed over live ticket sales. So I thought the stakes were up a little bit. And then when they pulled out, it was kind of quiet. I didn't really hear about it till after the fact. Just all of a sudden, the data got moved. So. No, I didn't make too much of it. I don't know that it had anything to do with us, or they just had a card that fell. I don't know what the backstory was on that, but I like competition, man. If somebody wants to compete, then let's compete.
So was a part of you bummed that they canceled it? Did you want to see if you could beat them? I know it's pay-per-view versus cable TV, but did you want that competition to exist on January 21st?
Yeah, so the only number we would have had to let us know, who the winner was would have been the live gate, because the commissions would have disclosed that. So there could even be some gamesmanship there, and you buy up your own ticket. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can happen in that PR battle. But I really didn't think a whole lot of it. We had a jump start on them. Don't forget that. We already had our launch and sold out a large part of that building. So I thought if the reports were to come out on Monday morning, I think that we would have been very competitive.
There is a narrative out there that the UFC, and I believe in it, right now there's a shortage of headliners, big names, people who can main event. And I think that's part of the reason why they put BJ in the main event. But right now, Conor, John Jones, Ronda Rousey, Brock Lesnar, GSP, who's going to headline? Where are the draws? Does a part of you think, well, here you could have headlined those shows, you could have been a draw? Like, is there a part of you that thinks maybe it could have worked out differently, and like your value's even higher these days because you're coming back? That's a big story. It's going to do well on Spike. It's going to do well with tickets. You're someone that they could use these days.
Yeah, well, and here's the deal. It's fair for media to say that, but it's a catch-22 because you can never be wrong. They're saying there's not enough stars. That's like saying, I had too much fun or too much money. I mean, there's no such thing as too many stars. So you make a statement like that in the media, you're always going to be right. They could have triple the stars. It's not enough stars. They're having 53 events. Bellator, we got the same problem. We're having 23 events scheduled in 2017. You can't have enough stars. So I think it's a fair point. And then some of the people you named, Errol, aren't the stars that you think they are. They're very well known, but not all of their numbers are what you think they are. It's really tough. And I'll tell you this too. In this coming fight that I've got, it is a big fight. And the number one thing that sells in fighting, it's not a title fight. It's not a main event. The number one thing that sells is a grudge match. But the number two thing that sells is a comeback. That would trump a main event or a title fight just on its face. So, yeah, comeback fight's a big deal, man. And, Tito's got a retirement element to it. I think that there's a few intriguing parts there. But, my contract's my contract. I'm out of the pay-per-view bonus business. I'm not on pay-per-view anymore. My deal's my deal. I like when people tune in because it feeds my ego, but my job doesn't change, man. I gotta go out and do what I gotta do.
Okay, so that being said, will you be disappointed if this doesn't break Bellator's Spike TV record? It's currently held by the late Kimbo Slice. Do you think that there is everything in this matchup to break over 2 million viewers on Saturday night?
Yeah, I would be disappointed. Yeah, those numbers matter to me. I used to have them all. I had the FS1 record. I had the Live Fox record. I had the North American Gate record. I lost them all. Conor now has them all. My contention is I never would have lost them had I not left. And I'm here to get them back, and I'm starting with this one. So do you feel that pressure? Like, do you feel like in the next 5 days you need to do as much promotion as possible? And you're a promoter as well in your own right. Submission Underground, you've got the promotion out of Oregon as well. Like, do you feel it's not pay-per-view, but you need to get people to watch on Saturday to justify this signing? Yeah, I think that's right. Here's the thing, and everybody lives by a code, but it would greatly dishonor me inside if they pay me my money and they come out in the red. I'm a company guy first, in front of myself, and if I'm working for somebody, I need to make sure that I bring in a surplus. So yeah, that is a reality. I do feel that. Now look, the gate's the gate. There's not a lot of tickets left. There are tickets left. There's not a lot though. And as far as the rating goes, I'm quite confident that we're gonna beat it. But I think your point's very fair. Yes, I do feel pressure on that, and I enjoy the process, and I will work very hard from now till then, and we'll live with the result.
Andy Foster of the California State Athletic Commission has told me that you've passed all the drug tests. Is that a nice little nod to the doubters, the critics? Here you are. You're no longer basically clean, Chael. You are clean. That's a nice thing.
Fully clean. Ariel, Andy Foster calls me for surprise test. You don't get any warning on the test. And frankly, that's the only way to do the test.
Right.
It's got to kind of be out of competition, unwarned. I'm on the other side of the track, never taken anything. I have never taken one of those tests and not been completely nervous. And my manager even goes, "Why would you be nervous?" And I go, "Jeff, I've never passed one of these things, man. I hate these things. Calling them every day. Do you have the results?" So is it a feather in the cap? I mean, I don't know that a guy should be complimented for doing what he's supposed to do. But perhaps I am an exception to that rule. Perhaps this is one where just by doing what I should do, I get a little pat on the back. Maybe it's unjust, but yeah, I feel like I have gotten
I think so. To the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, you're giving
yes.
one right now. So yes, I guess I have gotten a pat on the back simply for doing what I'm supposed to do.
It reminds me of my son who told me he got a timeout in class a couple of weeks ago, and then he came back a few days later and said, "Dad, guess what? I didn't get a timeout today." That's something to celebrate.
Good job, Oliver.
Thank you.
That's right. Good job, Oliver.
And what about the fact that you've been tested 3 times and Tito once? Is that fair?
It is with me. You have to understand, when you talk about fair. So generally speaking, if one guy's tested, the other guy's tested, it is totally level. Now that's not a rule. That's just generally the policy. So I think when you have a background like mine and you've been flagged before, I think that's very reasonable that you're going to be tested and perhaps your opponent isn't. And Tito has never been flagged. So I didn't have any kind of problem with it. And a little bit of it for mine was also just happenstance. I was at a show commentating that happened to be in California where my fight is. So they had the testers there and they came out ringside. I was in my suit and mic'd up and ready to go. And they grabbed me and pulled me in the back. Tito wasn't there. So they could have tested him if they wanted to. 2 last things.
I know you're getting him a little later, but to draw it up like this, the guy that you told your dad about, when he was about to pass, to be able to retire him, to beat him on the way out, if we're going to go back to old school pro wrestling and you beat the guy on his way out of the territory, you couldn't have scripted this any better. New stage, new company, new lease on life. This is pretty special.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. I've been after Tito for a while, and our paths just never crossed. By the time I finally made it to the UFC, he wasn't the champion anymore, but he was still the man. But by then, they had added weight classes. Again, to go back when I told my dad this in 2001, they only had light heavyweight and heavyweight. So when I got into the UFC and was able to go into a middleweight class, it was just never going to happen. We just weren't going to cross paths. So I'm glad to get matched up with him. I really don't have anything against Tito as a guy. I mean, he's been driving me nuts lately, but before that, I've always just kind of thought good things about him. I don't really know one way or the other, but as far as a competitor goes, man, I could have beat all those guys from back in that time era. Tito Ortiz was on top of the bill, and he was the champion, and he was selling the tickets. He never would have had that belt if I was around. And it's not because he wasn't a great fighter, but I was the best fighter back then. I didn't even get into the company, until I was 28 years old. And then I left the company, Bodog and WEC, got back at like 33 years old. So I do have resentment that a large part of my window was missed. I beat 12 UFC veterans before I ever got into the UFC. That was a lot of guys. That's more UFC wins than Tito had while in the UFC. And so, again, I wouldn't take away from his career or Liddell's career or any of those guys' career, but they weren't me. None of those guys would have been champion if I could have got my break. That's my contention. I'm either right or I'm not, but I've been singing this song for 17 years, and on January 21st, I'm going to find out one way or the other.
That's a phenomenal sort of pitch as to why people should watch. And my last question was, and it kind of feeds into what you were just saying, it's a rare off weekend for UFC. This is a big deal for not only you, but the company. It's a great card, I think, with Halleck Gracie and Paul Daly, Brennan Ward. I mean, they've really stacked the deck for you. Why should fans tune in to the return of Chael Sonnen?
I want to try to sell this fight. Again, I'm in a different business now. Don't forget, Aaron, I'm not in the pay-per-view
But the ratings business.
Yeah, it's live and free. And so, live, free, and only on Spike TV. I want people to tune in because it feeds my ego, and really for no other reason than that. I think it's going to be a great match, but let the people decide. If they want to see it, they can see it. But I'm not selling them anything, man. I can't sell them something if I wanted to, Errol. It's free.
All right. Chael, we appreciate it. Best of luck to you. Can't wait.
One final thing, Helwani. Kaboom.
Welcome back, Chael Sonnen. There he is. January 21st, Inglewood, The Forum. Chael Sonnen versus Tito Ortiz after all these years. And the big story, of course, Chael Sonnen fighting for the new promotion. He's never fought for them before. He hasn't fought since November of 2013. Since that loss to Rashad Evans, this is a big deal for the company. The free agent signings are great, but they have to deliver as well. Phil Davis, I think, has delivered. Benson Henderson, I think, has delivered. In terms of, the big fight, hasn't delivered in terms of performance, I think is fair. But I think it got them the notoriety and the attention that they wanted. But you got to win the fights. Will Chael Sonnen deliver? Will he get them the ratings? Will he get them the attention? Will he get them the buzz? Will he get them the ticket sales? It sounds like it's pretty good thus far. This is a big one for Bellator. This justifies a lot. And it's a good card. They've stacked the deck. It's one of their better cards. Worth watching this Saturday, in my opinion. And there's no competition. UFC not doing a card anymore in Anaheim.